All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to the Sinclair Method Q&A. We're hosting today. My name's Katie Lane with Thrive Alcohol Recovery. And today I have with me Bruce Rose from Rethink Drink, coming all the way from Scotland, in the remote parts of Scotland, because he's having some internet issues. So there might be a little bit of a delay on this call. But welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here. How are you doing, Bruce?
Yeah, really good, thanks. And apologies for the internet. I'm on my third internet system in the last 2 weeks. So we're trying lots of different systems because we're in I would think you'd call it the outback in Scotland. And yeah, so we're just trying to get some system that's going to give us good internet coverage. So apologies for any delay or
Yeah, we'll do our best to get through it. There might just be a slight delay for folks listening, but just want to welcome everyone again to this Q&A. You know, this is really a place for you all to come and get your questions answered that you have about the Sinclair Method. I'm going to be supporting you from a perspective of, I have my personal experience with the method, and I've also been a coach to others for over 5 years now. And Bruce has also been working with people on the Sinclair Method specifically for several years. He also has a really interesting background coming from more abstinence-based traditional recovery and working in that for a long time. And Bruce is someone who thought TSM was too good to be true, for lack of a better word. When he first learned about it, he thought it was a load of rubbish. I think I remember him saying. So he's kind of been on a journey himself of, working in traditional treatment and then discovering this method, and then now working with people on it for years and just seeing how effective it is. So we're here to answer those questions. We're not medical doctors, so we can't speak to your medication question specifically. If you have questions around dosing or things like that, that's for your physician. But we would love to answer your questions around, anything else related to the method, what you can expect with the results, habit change, lifestyle changes, creating new coping skills, and just everything that goes along with meaningfully and sustainably changing your relationship with alcohol. So really excited to be here with you guys. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We are live streaming on a few different platforms. We're on Facebook in a couple of places and also on YouTube. So just be aware, if you're on one or the other platform, you won't see the comments or questions from others that are coming in, but we will do our best to get to them. So Bruce, I wanted to kick things off to ask you a question that I see a lot on our social media channels. It's asked in slightly different ways, but a recent question I just got the other day was someone who said, I've been on the medication for 3 months and it's not working. Like, why isn't it working? What should I do? And so these are the types of questions I see a lot, where they say, I've been on it for a week, I've been on it for 3 months, for 1 month, and it's not working. What do you say to people who are just starting out on naltrexone and, they're probably not getting support? I would imagine, if they're putting that kind of comment on a social channel. What would you say when someone comes to you with that type of question or concern?
yeah. A few different things. Again, it's worth excuse me. It's probably worth more of a deeper dive into what do they mean by it's not working, because everyone's concept of something's not working is completely different to someone else's. The number of times I will speak to someone and they'll say to me, oh, it's not moving, it's not happening, it's just not happening at the moment. But just like you guys do at Thrive with drink diaries and drink logs, the number of times that I'll then sit down with someone with a drink log, and what they mean by it's not working is that they have seen success. It has progressed through the whole thing, but they're not where they necessarily want to be at that stage. But I would, in most cases, the first thing I would say to people is I would need to go back and say, are you 100% compliant with the medication? And if they are, that's great. Then I'd be saying to them, are you keeping a drink diary or a drink log of what you're drinking week on week? Because again, Katie, that there sometimes is an initial drop when people start on the medication, but the rest of the program can be little success upon little success upon little success, and that's why it's a 3 to 9 month program. So, or whatever, however long it takes someone. So when you're seeing little successes each week, it doesn't necessarily feel as if you're making a huge big step moving forward. So people might think, well, I'm not seeing any success, so therefore it's not happening at the speed I wanted it to happen at. And sometimes as well, people compare it to abstinent-based models, where an abstinent-based model will appear to be working overnight. You stop drinking, and then apparently everything is solved and sorted. It's not the Sinclair method. It's not, but the Sinclair method is more of a gradual reduction. And I would then go back and say, if you're not keeping a diary or a log, keep a diary or a log of your drinking, and then you'll see that, okay, we may have dropped 10% or 20% or whatever it is. We can see how much is dropping, and then take it from there. Or it's a case of someone's taken the medication, they've seen a little bit of a reduction initially, but then, as you were saying, this is where the support, I think, I don't think, I know now, is so important, is to have a coach or have someone or a program that can talk you through the actual process, where you can do it step by step by step. Because without that, just swallowing a pill and hoping for the whole thing to work, it just won't happen.
Yeah, really well said. And that's the questions I always have whenever I see those comments. And again, I see them regularly, like at least a couple of times a week in different forms. But whenever I see that, I'm always really curious to ask them about 5 more questions back. Like you said, are you compliant? What else are you doing besides taking the medication? With regards to, habit changes or goal setting or drink logging and things like that, or mindfully drinking. And oftentimes, what I find with people on the Sinclair method, kind of like what you were speaking about, where maybe the expectations they had for what working looks like are not actually how the medicine works. Because this treatment really does, honestly, for me personally, it felt like a miracle, but it didn't happen overnight. If I would have 2 or 3 months in assessed whether or not it was working, I would have said, I think it's working. Like, I'm not really sure. Some days it might be, some days it's not. And so for people, I think, to recognize that, like you were saying, the changes we often see are really gradual and something that's not always obvious. And we could dismiss it as like, no big deal. Like, oh, I was drinking a little bit more slowly, or I noticed I wasn't craving as intensely, or I had 20% less alcohol last night. These like kind of subtle ways that we're noticing our drinking changing. I think typically when someone's following the protocol correctly, those are the types of changes they're not going to see. It's not going to be an overnight success for most of us, where just, a month or two in, we're going to see these, really massive changes in our drinking. And that's why we're always telling people to give this treatment time to work. I did a poll a while ago and asked people how long it took them to get to that point where they felt completely free from the problem. And 6 to 12 months was the average time frame people selected. And then the next largest group of people were 2 years or more. So just giving someone an idea that, yes, it could work 3, 6, 9, 12 months, but even if it hasn't worked by that point completely, what happens for a lot of people is they're seeing really positive changes and they can tell that it's working, but they're still working to change the habits and the coping skills and things like that. So yeah, and I just want to again welcome everyone
And
who's
just
here. It
one
looks like
example
we
of one that I had.
Oh, go ahead, Bruce.
Sorry, it's the delay again. Just one example of a client I had today as well was that when I went on the phone with them, they said to me, "Oh, it's not happening. It's just not happening at the speed I want it to happen." And when we sat down and actually analysed what was happening with her program and what was happening, she was starting to drink normally at 5 o'clock at night, and she would go to bed at about 10 o'clock at night with a glass of wine. She would take a glass of wine to bed. And when we started chatting and through the conversation, she had pushed her start time from 5 o'clock to 6:30, and she wasn't having a drink an hour and a half before she went to bed, and she doesn't take wine to bed anymore. So from 10 o'clock to 9:30, that was an hour and a half. In the morning, sorry, in the evening, she'd gone from 5 o'clock to 6:30, 6:30. So that was an hour and a half. So in her normal drinking day, she had reduced down, she had removed 3 hours of that drinking period. and that's massive. And then when she looked at, she hadn't been keeping a log, so we went back and had a look at the log, or said, listen, start keeping a log. And those 3 hours every day now, she has 3 hours of the normal drinking time that she's not drinking. So that in itself was a success. And they've been on the program about 2 months. And she's still drinking every day. So she's looking at success as being, I'm still drinking every day, so therefore it's not happening. But I said, that's perfect. You've knocked off 3 hours. If you were starting to drink at 5 and then you start drinking at 8 o'clock at night, that's massive. Massive. It's not where you want to be, but it's a good start.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's not as obvious, like you were saying, the kind of abstinence base where you can clearly see, okay, I'm not drinking anymore. And it's these more subtle changes where we notice, that we're drinking a little bit less. Like you said, we're drinking, in a smaller window of time, we're drinking more slowly. And I just encourage people to pay attention to those things. And I think having that mindset is so important to this treatment. Someone else recently reached out to me and said that they were given this medication a long time ago, but they didn't understand that it needed time to work or exactly how it worked and how to use it. And so they stopped taking it. And I've heard that story so many times where someone, or even their doctor said, yeah, if you're, not where you want to be in 3 months, we'll stop the medication. And again, I'm not a doctor. I've just heard these anecdotes where they don't have proper expectation that this treatment really does need time. And so they stop taking it too early. But yeah, it's so important for people to have that accurate expectation. So I just again want to welcome everyone who's here. If you have comments or questions for us, please feel free to drop them in the chat, whether you're coming in from Facebook or YouTube. We would love to address your questions that you have about the Sinclair Method and how this treatment can help you to cut back or reduce your alcohol consumption. And sorry, we have a bit of a delay with Bruce.
This reminds me, Katie, of I was just about to say, it reminds me of the 1980s or 70s when they used to have all the different programs that would speak to people abroad, and there would be this big delay from all the news. And
exactly. So Bruce, I wanted to ask you something that's come up recently as well for some of our members in our program, and just hello to any of our members that are here watching, is the challenge that can come with family support on the method, or I could say lack of family support, where maybe the loved ones mean well and they don't mean to be judgmental or come off in a punitive way toward the person on the Sinclair Method. But oftentimes that happens, and it's probably unintentional most of the time. But for those who are listening, maybe that they're a loved one and they're wondering, how is it that I can support someone on this treatment? I'm wondering what you have to say to that, and maybe what it's looked like with some of the clients you've worked with, or just in general, because I've just seen those types of comments or concerns come up a lot, where people are seeing progress on the method, but they feel like their spouse is watching over their shoulder and giving them, too much pressure, or they're asking questions in a judgmental way, and they don't feel supported, essentially. So I just wanted to ask that and see if you had any thoughts or input on that.
yeah, I think the partner. Right, I'm back again. Sorry. I think the partner support can be absolutely vital in the whole process. The main reason for that is, in a lot of situations, you have husband and wife partners who one partner is struggling with the alcohol intake, the other partner isn't. 9 times out of 10, it's because one partner may be getting a higher reward from the endorphin, or the brain, more often than not, is more dependent on the endorphin than the other partner. So one partner can have a drink or 2 drinks and leave it. The other partner, when it has 1 drink, it just goes dung, 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 dung. So I think it's really important. We spend a lot of time working with partners, even when it's required, to sit down with the partner and say, okay, this is what we believe causes alcohol dependency. This is the neurological explanation that Dr. Sinclair found from his research. So when we explain that to a partner, and then we explain the Sinclair method to the partner and say, okay, this is what happens. You take the medication 1 hour, and this is what to expect. It really helps the partner understand that the other partner who is drinking is not doing it because they're trying to cause an issue in the marriage, or they're trying to cause hassle or whatever. There is a neurological process going on. That's the first thing. But the second thing I have learned is that no matter how much you tell a partner how the process works and is going on, people who have never been through it will never really truly understand the struggle that people have. So what we like to do is we will speak to a partner every 2 or 3 months on the process, because even though they understand it at the beginning and someone gets going on the program, what then happens is a month or 2 months or 3 months later, again, the partner's understanding of, okay, it's willpower, that they don't really get the neurological side of it in a lot of cases, because we're not working with them every day, so or every week. So sometimes it's good to have a chat with a partner every month, 2 months, 3 months, just to refresh them on, okay, this is what's happening. Your partner, they're expecting the partner after 2 months to be not drinking and everything's going to be fine again. So we just need to talk. I think it's really good to talk the family and the partner and the loved ones through the process as well, so they understand it, it's helping them, and they can also support and encourage the individual.
Yeah, I think that just basic understanding for someone, a loved one who is, has someone in their life who's on the Sinclair method, for them to understand just the realistic expectations of how this method works and why drinking actually helps it to work better. And also understanding how alcohol use disorder develops, in the brain, and that it really isn't because the person is weak-willed or because they want to sabotage themselves or their family. Those are kind of the symptoms of what's really going on, which I loved how Claudia Christian put it in a recent talk she put out, that, her brain was hijacked by the addiction. And I remember one client telling me it felt like they had a parasite living in them, this like alcohol dependence. It just took control. And that's where naltrexone, following the Sinclair method, is so powerful, because it kind of undoes that wiring in our brain that is driving the compulsive behavior, the behavior that feels like it's beyond our logic and reason, because it really is. So many of us who've struggled with alcohol have been in that place where we're so fed up, we say, that's it, I'm done, I'm not going to drink anymore. And whether it's a day later or a few days or a few weeks or a few months, we're back at it again, because that really powerful part of our brain that is driving the addiction kind of overpowers all of our, reasons why we wanted to stop in the first place. And that's why, for me, this treatment just felt like such a miracle, because I would try to quit drinking so many times before the Sinclair method, and I would fail at it so many times. And it just caused me to feel like I was, weak-willed or not capable or just not disciplined. But when I started on this treatment, I just felt like the grip alcohol had on me just started to loosen over time. And I just saw myself not care about drinking. Like, I could go days or weeks and just be like, yeah, I don't care. Sure, I'll have a drink tonight. But if I don't have a drink, that's fine as well. Whereas before, it was like every day I needed to have a drink. And if I wasn't drinking, I was irritable and frustrated and anxious. And I now know that that's kind of a form of alcohol withdrawal in some way. So, yeah, this treatment, I think for loved ones, it's, just super helpful to understand the basics of how alcohol develops, or alcohol use disorder kind of develops in the first place. And then also how and why this method helps someone unlearn the behavior.
Okay.
And sorry for the
I'm only seeing. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, for those who are just joining, there's a bit of a delay with Marie and Bruce. So I'm sorry if you're seeing a bit of a delay when we're talking. So that's what's happening. There's an internet connection issue. Seeing some of these comments come in here, Jen, she said, I thought I was failing because even though my volume was cut in half, I found that I felt awful more awful than before. Then I just gave up hard liquor and a remarkable difference. Wow. What's your experience, Bruce, working with people who are hard liquor drinkers in TSM? What's your general kind of best practice there?
Yeah, get them off it as soon as possible is the best thing. But the reason for that is that it's much easier to drink hard liquor a lot quicker. You can drink more volume quicker. And just for Jen's question, um, you cut in half and then you started to feel awful, more awful than before, and then you gave up hard liquor. So that's probably my experience with hard liquor. In most cases, with people with AUD, the reason they're drinking hard liquor is because it's the shortest, quickest way to get to the bang, I call it, the reward, the endorphin reward. So what happens is when you start naltrexone and it starts to regulate, or I call arrest the endorphin, what then happens is the brain is not chasing as much of that big bang as possible. So what happens is the hard liquor, you're not drinking for the endorphin reward, which is why you drink the hard liquor. That's not there, or it's reduced dramatically. So what then happens is you start to taste the flavor of the hard liquor. You start to realize what's going on, and so all of a sudden it doesn't become as enjoyable. You may be drinking more than you really want to feel. So when you then change onto wine or beer or another form of drink, then all of a sudden it will settle. So the feeling awful was probably because what was driving the hard liquor drinking was the only thing that was driving that was the huge endorphin reward. And when you're not getting that, so many people will turn to Katie and I and say, listen, that my wine's not tasting as good, or my drinks aren't tasting as good anymore. And it's because what was actually driving the drink was the massive endorphin reward and not necessarily the flavor. It's a learned behavior. If you give alcohol to a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, they'll spit it out because it's horrible. But we learn as adults over the years, if we do this and it tastes horrible, but we get this reward, okay, we'll learn to put up with it. And eventually the reward becomes greater than the taste. But then when you remove or lower the reward with the naltrexone, then all of a sudden that 11-year-old taste comes back again. It's like, oh, this is not too nice, actually.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, well said, Bruce.
And sorry, one other thing, Katie, sorry. If it's, I'm only seeing YouTube comments at this end. So.
Okay, yeah, me as well. I don't think anyone has commented from Facebook yet, so that's okay. Yeah, for anyone who's just joining from Facebook or YouTube, drop your comments or questions below and we will get to them. John is asking, I'm concerned with potential negative interactions with naltrexone with my other medications, such as heart medications, statin, anxiety meds, so on and so. Besides prescription meds, I take over the counter. So we're not doctors, so we can't really speak to that. But just generally speaking, when someone goes on this medication, they have to get the prescription from a doctor, whether it's your regular doctor or you go to a specialist like through our program, or if you're in the UK, Bruce's program. But the doctor is going to do an evaluation and, double check all the medications you're on and make sure that none of them interact with naltrexone. So that's something that they can definitely speak to. Generally speaking, I know several members personally and in our program who are, for example, are on anti-anxiety or antidepressants, and they're on naltrexone as well. So that's just generally speaking. I don't know what other medications specifically you're on. And of course, that's a great question for the doctor. The one medication that people cannot take for certain with naltrexone is an opiate medication, because naltrexone is an opiate antagonist. So if there's any medications with opiates in it, generally speaking, naltrexone cannot be taken with that. But again, if you haven't gotten the prescription yet, you can definitely ask the doctor about all of that when you do meet with them.
Okay. And Helena was saying, what about a partner who has AUD and isn't interested in doing TSM? I've been trying to work with them, but not getting results. Helena, sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. It's common, unfortunately. But a couple of things to know about it is I've found that there are two different situations when it comes to a partner who's struggling with AUD. There's the two stages. One stage is when someone is in not necessarily the early days of consuming alcohol, but they're at a stage where their alcohol use is uncomfortable, but it's not creating a huge amount of issues in life. So therefore, their only understanding and their only knowledge is my only way out of this is to stop drinking and never drink again. So that can be early to middle stages of AUD. When someone gets to the stage where they are drinking quite heavily on a day-to-day basis, I have never, and I'm almost guarantee Katie hasn't either, we have never worked with who would not give their left hand to get rid of their AUD. Nobody does, or nobody drinks at that level for the fun. They do it because it's a need. It becomes a necessity in their life. The brain, the desire for the endorphin is so big that it becomes a necessity. So it could well be that it's not that he doesn't want to stop, but at that level, every time, if he's tried stopping on numerous occasions through maybe AA or peer support groups or rehab or stopping drinking themselves, and it hasn't worked, every time someone tries an abstinence-based program and it doesn't work, they lose a little bit of hope. So they then try it again, they drink, period of sobriety, relapse, they lose a little bit more hope. So by the time they've tried 3 or 4 times and it hasn't worked, a lot of people will actually give up giving up. And what then happens is they don't see a way out of it. So it's easier to drink than it is to go through possible withdrawals, go through the cravings, to fight the craving, to live life with this constant battle of drinking, that it's easier to drink. But I can guarantee you that they want a solution. They just don't know how to do it, or they're scared. So keep gently speaking to them. Katie's got, you'll probably know, but Katie's got hundreds of videos on YouTube. I think you're coming from YouTube anyway, so you'll know that. Any video, occasionally, if your partner's in a good mood, get them to watch a video. Speak to Katie. Do something just every now and then, and just say, listen, the method doesn't require someone to stop drinking, which might be a big fear, and explain the success rate with it, and that it's not a conventional way of treating it. It doesn't have to be a battle. It doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And Helena, for you, like, I think you just needing to lead by example in this way. We have a member in our program. She was in a really similar situation where she was on the Sinclair Method and her partner was not. And drinking was kind of something they always did together for decades in their marriage. And she was starting the method and he wasn't. And she had made progress, but really had stalled and plateaued and was frustrated and not sure why. And after I think about 1.5 years of her being on the method, maybe 2 years, her husband started the treatment and together they were doing it, and she just saw this sharp decline in her drinking. And so she was reflecting on how powerful it was, just the home environment she was in, and how much her husband's drinking was contributing to her kind of plateau on the method, even though she was compliant with it. And so you know very well, like if someone is not, 100% ready to commit to this treatment protocol, even though they don't have to quit drinking, they can keep drinking. It just starts by taking the medicine first. If someone's not ready to do the treatment yet, and they're not in that place of internal motivation and willingness to take the step toward change, nobody's going to be able to force them or convince them. And I've seen it so many times where a loved one almost wants this more for their spouse than the spouse wants it for themselves. And it's not to say that that won't ever happen, because I know it can. I've seen it happen where someone gets, they're finally ready themselves to do the change, but it's really hard to force any type of change on anyone, whether it's alcohol reduction or weight loss or anything, really. But I think where you can be most effective is just continuing to lead by example and speak to the benefits of how the Sinclair Method has changed your life personally and how the freedom feels. And like you said, your favorite wine now tastes like bad vinegar. That's same thing happened to me as well. And you start flushing from drinking like when you used to. So just talking about and being that example of, how much life is better in this place of freedom from alcohol and all of the costs that alcohol was costing you essentially when you were in the thick of it. But I just sympathize and empathize with you, because being with someone who still drinks heavily when you're taking this, seriously and wanting to really fix this aspect of your life, it can be really difficult to have to cope with that. And so I just understand the struggle. Yeah.
Okay. It's Bama Jen. My apologies, Bam. Do we know each other? And I'm really, really sorry if we do. Is it TikTok, or it could be TikTok? My apologies, Jen. I think you might be saying that I know you from somewhere. I speak to so many people on TikTok and here and everywhere else. Remind if we do have spoken somewhere, let me know where.
Yeah.
It's possibly TikTok, I'm guessing. So, and you're also saying it's amazing. I physically cannot consume enough beer or wine to get hungover. Absolutely fantastic, and that's the process. We hear it, and Katie hears it so often that I don't have time to go into it tonight. But there is a very, very natural cutoff around about the 2 to 3 drink level on the Sinclair Method. We hear it again and again and again. Clients saying, "I've had 2 drinks, and then I lost interest." There is a neurological explanation that I'm not going to bore you with tonight, but there is a very, very clear cutoff at about the 2 drink level, 2 or 3 drink level for a lot of people once they get into it. So well done, Jen. Keep going.
Yeah, that's such a good feeling. I clearly remember that from my Sinclair Method time where, I mean, 2 or 3 drinks was just me getting started. And like, if someone tried to cut me off at that point, I would be so annoyed and I would just want to keep drinking and, really do just about anything to keep drinking. But with this method, it's like you start, even if you're really craving it and that first drink is really good and you're like, yeah, I'm going to have a second one. But then that urgency and desire for more just kind of fades away to where I would pour a third glass and it would just sit there and I'd be like, I'm not going to drink that. Like it sounded gross and I couldn't even force myself to do it. So Jen, I'm just so encouraged to hear of your transformation with that. It's so cool to see ourselves get this control back over alcohol and have that off switch again when we didn't have it before. Like it just, it has such a positive ripple effect into so many areas of our lives. We get our confidence back. We can trust ourselves again. We just see that, we essentially see alcohol for what it is. It doesn't have this control or power over us anymore. So that's awesome. Okay.
Okay, and I'll come back to I'll just go on to Frank's comment if that's okay. I drank half a litre of whiskey a day for 10 years. Yesterday, the first time I had no whiskey, I had horrible stomach cramps, I'm guessing, vomiting, and bad water diarrhea. I'm looking at my whiskey bottle and close. Have one now just to stop my cramps and pain. Okay, Frank, the first thing to say really quickly is half a bottle of whiskey a day for 10 years. The first time. My question straight away is, have you gone from half a litre of whiskey to nothing? If that's the case, then I don't know if you've been drinking anything at all. If you are experiencing, where are we, 8:25, I'm just looking at the whiskey bottle and close, but just stop my cramps and pain. Again, we've got to be a little bit careful with our information and advice here. There's a few details that I would need to know with that. Is number one, are you using naltrexone? And number two is, have you just gone from half a litre of whiskey to nothing? The stomach cramps and vomiting and stuff could be a form of withdrawal. So if it is the case, then the advice that we have to give is please seek medical advice on potential withdrawal issues, or speak to a doctor as quickly as possible. You don't want to be going from half a litre of whiskey to nothing without a proper medical detox. If you are reducing it and you're drinking something else, then that could then be other medical issues, which again would speak to the doctor. But please be very, very, very careful. And we don't advise it at all to go from half a litre to nothing. That's an abstinent-based process. And with an abstinent-based process, it needs proper medical detox. It needs a proper medical detox. So just a few, I don't know the situation, Frank, but I'm just trying to give him the full advice out there just in case. If you are on naltrexone, then try and swap it in for something else if you can drink something else. I just don't know the full. If you can answer that, Frank, that would be handy, and then we can give. But definitely with stomach cramps and vomiting, it's obviously worth speaking to the doctor as soon as possible.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're using the Sinclair method or not, or just cold turkey. Definitely something to take seriously for sure, regardless of what you're doing. And hopefully you have a doctor or someone you can reach out to get more specific guidance. Because if it is alcohol withdrawal, definitely should be taken seriously. And there's things that you can do, but you'll have to seek medical help. Yeah. So Bruce, I'm curious, you talk a lot about how in the people you work with, you encourage them to use drink logs to track their drinking. And that's something I was not very consistent with on the Sinclair method. And I wished I would have been, because I would just love to be able to look back on that data now. But recently on our group calls in the program, several people had kind of fallen off tracking, and then they got back to tracking, and they were speaking about how helpful it was just to have the information there. And it was even motivating for them, because if they had, 14 drinks in a week and that was their goal, it would motivate them to have an extra alcohol-free day just so their weekly numbers would look good. And so I really do think drink tracking can be really, really beneficial, but it's something a lot of people put off or ignore, or like me, maybe they're not very consistent with it. So I'm just curious, why is that such an important pillar of your program and the people you work with? What have you seen with people who log their drinks?
Absolutely, utterly vital would be my answer. And the reason for that is there are numerous things that come from it. The drink, that so many people will keep a drink, especially if you're keeping your own drink log. People think, well, I know how much I'm drinking, so why record it? I know I'm having X amount every day. But the main thing with the drink logs is not necessarily the totals, although it's good to have the totals and everything else. But we're not keeping the drink log to focus on the totals and reduce the totals. But what we're doing is we're recording on a drink log. The first thing we will see on, I've kept drink logs with clients for 5 years now, and the majority of people we see, I would say probably close to 80%, will have an initial reduction on naltrexone. So what I'm trying to do when I'm working with a client, I'm seeing what is their pre-Sinclair method total. After the first week, I tell them the first week, just drink as you feel led the first week, record it, and then we see what your natural drop is. Then the next stage is all about habitual change. So that second stage, what we then do is we sit down with the diary, and we sit down with people and say, okay, let's have a look at the diary. Now, all I'm looking for in that stage in the diary is, yes, we're having a look at the totals each week to see if we're going up and down or what's happening very quickly. But the main thing I'm looking for are patterns. So if someone's drinking, we do it in units in the UK. So 10 units is a glass of bottled wine. So let's say someone is drinking 10 units, 10 units, 10 units Monday to Friday, and then 20 units Saturday, Sunday, for example. So straight away, that shows me the pattern is drink less during the week, drink more at the weekend. Then what I'll do is when I'm working with a client, I'll dive into the diary. So we say, okay, your 10 units that you have, what does that day look like? What's going on in that day when you drink your 10 units? So what I'm looking for is, what time do they start drinking? What are they drinking? If they're drinking hard liquor, I'll get them to change onto wine or beer. What time are they drinking? What time do they finish? What time do they go to bed? I'm looking for that pattern within that daily routine. Then what we do is we put together a change program based on that diary. So then what we can do, so when I'm talking to a client each week, let's say a client is starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll say to the client, okay, this week, all I want you to do is, instead of starting at 4 o'clock, I want you to start at 5 o'clock. That's all I want you to do. Be 100% compliant with the medication and do it that way. Then what happens is we will then, and I say, don't worry about the figures. Just keep recording it and keep the figures going, but don't worry about them. Don't focus on the figures, because we don't want people getting all guilty about having one extra drink on the end of the day. But we want to keep it as a monitor. So we change 1 hour, then we change another hour. We might change wine or hard liquor so we do lots of different habitual stuff. And we keep a track of the diary for motivation, to show that we're going in the right direction. We're going to have bad days where it goes back up, and we can then dive into the diary when we look at it. 10 10 20, 10 10 10 20. Okay, what happened on that 20? Oh, I had an argument, I had a bad day at work. So we can then talk the client through, okay, that's normal as long as you took your medication. So it teaches it. We can learn so much based on the diary patterns. We change the habitual side, and the figures will naturally drop on the back of it. Very quick 1 minute, 5-minute explanation.
No, it's so helpful. And I think it's, it's not just about, like you were saying, the drink numbers, because I think some people can get hyper focused on that and they're feeling plateaued or something like that. Or for me, I was even afraid to face the numbers. Like I was one of those people where I generally knew how much I was drinking, but to log that, it's kind of like when you know you've gained weight and you have got to step on the scale and weigh yourself. It's like, I don't want to know what it is. So that was my fear around why I wasn't logging, and just kind of laziness as well. But I think it's so important to have that data, but kind of to your point, to be able to see, okay, what are the trends and patterns we're noticing? What are the times when you are drinking less versus drinking more? What's happening? What's your emotional state? What's your environment? Did you eat before? Did you not? It's helpful to have that, but to not be hyper focused on it, because we may still be drinking at a plateaued level where we're not seeing any reduction, but maybe we're not having hangovers anymore, or maybe we're, having a meal before we start drinking, or maybe we're pacing our drinks over, a longer period of time or a shorter amount of time. So looking at these other ways that it has our relationship with alcohol and how we see alcohol has changed as well, and not be so hyper focused on the numbers.
And it takes away a lot of the numbers. I'm always very aware that anyone I'm working with has potentially been through some abstinent-based program. So there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame that comes with it. So the first thing I'm saying to the client is, first and foremost, the first thing you need to know about AUD is it's not your fault. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, we're going to work this program. So it doesn't matter what's on the figures. It's not your fault. There shouldn't be any guilt or stuff attached to it. It's not your fault. Whatever is in that figure, it is. Now, I will never question someone about how much is in. If someone comes and there's 30 units on one day, I will never turn around to them and go, how much? Wow, what happened there? It's simply a case of, okay, that's part and parcel. The only question I have to everything is, did you take your pill? And if they took the pill, whether you had 30 units or 10 units, we can work with it. And a lot of that is more about encouraging someone. If they have a bad day, which you're going to have, I promise you, on the Sinclair Method, as long as you've taken your pill, it's okay to have the bad day. So when we do get the bad day, people go, oh, I had an extra bottle of wine and I shouldn't have done it. That's the old abstinent-based guilt coming back in. So I say, hey, listen, it doesn't matter. I hope you enjoyed it. Did you take your pill? And they said, yes. I said, so it doesn't matter. So what happened? Oh, I had an argument with my partner, and oh, I was just so angry I had an extra bottle of wine. I said, right, that's fine. Now, if you then see on the drink diary that it keeps repeating, then you know, okay, we need to find a way or help the client through how do we deal with that emotional situation with the argument with the partner with less alcohol, so that we're not suddenly just turning to alcohol. So we can change that habitual pattern. And there'll be a whole bunch of them. What do I do? What do I do at birthday? And that's why something like yourselves, Thrive and everything, it's so important for people to be plugged in to a community and a training process and videos and Zooms and all that kind of stuff where people can explain that whole process. And then it makes it so much easier for someone, so you don't get guilty. I had a message from someone today who had a bad week, and then they just stopped taking the medication because they thought, oh, what's happened? But if they'd had someone to talk the way through it, then they would have been absolutely fine.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite things about our program is the group support aspect and just seeing how much people get out of that, because being able to connect with others in real time who are going through it, maybe they're a few months ahead of you or a few months behind you, and they can just speak to these challenges that so many people have, and being able to relate on that level with another individual who really gets it, who really gets what it's like to struggle with alcohol, and who gets what it's like to overcome this through naltrexone and the Sinclair method. Just having that support is very not only encouraging but edifying, and just reassuring for people to know, like, okay, I'm not alone in this struggle. Okay, maybe I forgot to take my medication last night, but that person did too, and they're doing really well now. It's just without being so isolated in your own thoughts and your own environment with it, where you're able to reach out to someone and get that extra support. It's so beneficial and crucial, and I think that's honestly why AA has been the program for so long, because this group support type of format where there's accountability and someone who's gone before you and can be alongside you. Like, there's a reason that it's one of the more well-known programs that existed today. Of course, not to speak to the success rate or other things related to AA, that's for another time, but just for people to realize that that support is really beneficial. So don't do this alone.
And it does. I mean, I was how can I explain this? The doctor, we work with one specific doctor here in the UK, and that doctor that we work with is probably the UK's #1 addiction specialist. And when I started working with them, I had heard a lot about the Sinclair Method, and it had a clinically trialed success rate of 78%. Now, when I went to the doctor that we now work with, the doctor said to me, he said, you do realize, Bruce, the success is only about 35%. And I said, really? I said, that's not what I've heard. I've read all about it. And long story short, I started working with him. He prescribed the medical things, everything else that came up medically. We were after the reduction program and the support program. 6 months later, he sent me an email and said, I don't know what's happening here, Bruce, but I've never written so many repeat prescriptions as it's happening with the way that we were working. And then what he said further down the track, he said, as a doctor, he's a medically trained researcher, medical researcher, an absolute expert in his field. But what he was doing still from a medical point of view, he would prescribe once a month, give them some instruction and say, come back and see me in a month when you need another medication. They would then come back and they would say, okay, I've seen a bit of a reduction, but it's leveled off. So the doctor would say, keep taking the medication, and it's still leveled off because there was no habitual change or support. So what we learned was when you include the habitual support with the medical knowledge of we've got thankfully one of the best in the country in the UK, when you put the two of them together, then bang, you get the success. And I think Claudia's really going through a stage now as where she's really starting to appreciate the how important the support side of it is. We don't say that just because what we do, but I have seen Now, yes, there are some people that take the medication and it just goes dung, 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 dung. But I would say, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it's fairly low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think typically when I've seen people who respond really quickly to naltrexone and just kind of do it on their own, it's because they've been doing other work to try to fix this issue, oftentimes for years. So they've already been in other programs. They have all of the tools for habit change, lifestyle change, and they start on naltrexone and they've already got this whole toolbox of things that they have as part of their life. And so they can just incorporate that in. But yeah, I was really humbled a few months into the treatment when I was, I started it thinking, oh, great, this pill's going to help me drink less. Like, I'm not going to have as many hangovers or blackouts. That's how I started the treatment. And a few months in, I realized, wow, as a daily drinker, my alcohol touches every area of my life, from my good days to my bad days, to when I'm bored, to when I'm depressed, happy, celebrating, socializing at home. Everything in my life revolved around drinking. And so the medicine was helping to quiet my urgency to drink and my craving to drink over time. But that left, like, honestly, more than 40 hours a week of when I was planning my drinking, thinking about my drinking, recovering from drinking. Like, that was a whole void to fill. And also, as someone who was a daily drinker, you better believe when I was bored or stressed, like, I was turning to a bottle or two of wine. And so it was like, okay, well, now that I don't want it as much, what else am I going to do to cope with that? And so that's what Bruce and I are oftentimes talking about is, changing our lifestyle in a gradual way so that we may still keep alcohol in our life, but it's not front and center anymore. And we've developed this balanced, healthier relationship to it. And naltrexone's not going to do that. Naltrexone's going to work in the brain to help quiet the desire, quiet the urge, give you more control. But the habit, the lifestyle piece, the creating new coping skills, naltrexone's not going to do those things for you. That's where we always say you have to meet the medication halfway. You've got to, gradually set goals and find other hobbies or rediscover other hobbies and give yourself a chance to practice different coping skills as well. And that takes time. That's why we encourage people to give this treatment, a year to see full results, because it's not something that's going to change overnight. So give yourself time, give yourself grace through this process.
And the one thing I learned as well was I've never had an alcohol problem, but I had a drug problem for 10 years. And my wife's a trained counselor. And in counseling, what they are always taught, counselors are always taught that when you're working with someone with substance use disorder or alcohol, or sorry, I thought it was someone at my door. So whether it's whatever it is, what happens is that when I started using other substances to when I finished using them was a 10-year period. Now, bear in mind, I was doing it all day, every day. So I'd wake up in the morning, first thing I'd do is use something, get myself right the way through the day, and I'd use it all day, every day. Now, what happens is when I was in 1920, I was dealing with every single emotional situation in life with some sort of substance. Like Katie's saying, whether I'm happy, sad, if I've had a bad day, if I've had a good day, if I'm going to a music festival, if I'm going wherever I'm going, we're doing whatever situation I'm in emotionally, psychologically, I would use a substance. So when I stop, when I'm 30, yes, I had to deal with the craving and everything else. But on the Sinclair method, if I had stopped by using the medication, the addiction to the endorphin would have been controlled very well. That's what the program and everything does. But as your alcohol intake reduces, an individual has to learn to deal with life again without the substance, without alcohol. And that's where the hard part is. So now some people like Matt, my partner with Rethink Drink, Matt had done, like you were saying, Katie, he had done 5 years of hard work with coaching and personal support. He had had periods of abstinence where he had done a lot of self-development. So when he came to taking the medication, he did go dung, dung, dung. But he had done 5 years previously of learning to deal emotionally and psychologically with life. And I think some people can do it. Some people need someone to hold their hand through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do see this other question that came in, and we're not doctors and we can't speak to medication dosing, but it is around that. I just wanted to address it because I saw it come in here. They said, when and what dosage should the medication be taken? My doctor is having me take 50 milligrams at noon and 50 milligrams at 4 p.m. So again, we cannot advise on medication dosing, but I will say the method that Bruce and I help people with typically is when when their doctor has put them on the Sinclair Method protocol, which involves using naltrexone in a targeted fashion before drinking. So usually an hour or two before the first alcoholic drink of the day. We support people whose doctors have put them on naltrexone in that way. If you look at all the research behind naltrexone, it has been used in different ways. So I don't know, what your drinking is, if you're hoping to remain alcohol free on naltrexone, if you're hoping to cut back, maybe your doctor has a specific plan for you. Different people do better at different doses. Some people need a higher dose, some people need a lower dose. So it's a very nuanced treatment protocol, and naltrexone's fairly versatile, I guess you could say, with how people are using it. But if you look at the research, the Sinclair Method protocol is what's been shown to be the most effective way. And Bruce and I, we specialize in that specific treatment, supporting people on that treatment. I'm a success story of it, and have been a coach to others in that field specifically for about 5 years. So we can't speak to the dosing. Your doctor must have you on that dosing regimen for a reason. But if you wanted to learn about the Sinclair Method, you can look into the book, The Cure for Alcoholism. All my videos on here are about it. But that's that. Anything you wanted to say regarding that?
No, absolutely, exactly the same as that. And obviously, anything to do, as Katie's already said, is go back to the doctor. If the doctor, difficult one to explain, but I would personally advise, we use a doctor here in the UK who understands the Sinclair Method, and he understands naltrexone. So it's probably, I mean, I don't know the States well, but I know there are doctors that understand the Sinclair Method and understand the medication itself. So yeah, it's all about, it's going back to the doctors and finding a doctor that understands the process, and then take the doctor's advice.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you'd like to reach out to us, we work with telemedicine doctors in the United States who can prescribe and who specialize in this specific protocol. So you can reach out to us at Thrive if you wanted more information about that or wanted to be put in touch with somebody. All right. Well, we had a decent amount of people here today, but not as many questions. So I do want to thank everyone who was here asking questions and participating in the conversation. It was great to have you guys here. I love doing these Q&As and just connecting with everyone. Any final thoughts or tips or things from you, Bruce, that you would like to add before we wrap up the Q&A for today?
Yeah, well, I'll just be completely corny. I don't know if that's an American expression. You mentioned at the beginning, my background was working in alcohol and drug rehab center management. I spent a number of years working with peer support groups, AA, CA, NA, SMART meetings. They're all good for a percentage of people. When the reason that I came out of that work and into the Sinclair Method was purely because it works, and there's no other way of explaining it. That my job was to go to the funerals. I've been to too many. I'm not going to go into all that stuff. I got news yesterday of a guy that was in rehab with us who unfortunately didn't make it last Friday. And it's just, we need to, worldwide, Katie's doing it in the States, but we need to get the message out there as much as we can. The success rate that Katie and I are seeing through the Sinclair Method is mind-blowing. And the main reason for it is they are starting to understand the science. We're treating it as not we, but the doctors and ourselves are treating it as a neurological condition. And when you treat it as a neurological condition in the first instance with medication, alongside a good support program to help you through that process, success goes through the roof. So if anyone's looking at this for the first time, or you're just looking into it, I cannot stress I've got nothing to do with Thrive, so you're in the States, please get in touch with Katie and Karen at Thrive. The program, I have never seen success or of stories like I'm seeing at the moment. I wish that we could put, this is my office, I wish I could put cameras in here and let you hear the conversations we have day in, day out with people. I've never seen, and I don't think in my lifetime, hopefully it will even improve even more, but I haven't seen anything that can touch the model so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's not like anything else out there. It really isn't. And it's hard to even put into words how effective it is until someone can experience it for themselves. And that freedom, like oftentimes with this treatment, I was just talking to someone how I would go weeks without drinking. And it wasn't me saying, okay, I'm going to take 2 weeks off and kind of white knuckle it and not drink the next couple of weeks. It was like day by day, I just didn't want to drink. It'd be 10 o'clock at night and I'd be like, oh, I didn't even think about drinking today. And so it's a completely different way to not only drink moderately, but if you want to have chunks of alcohol free time or go completely alcohol free without it being a second thought. And for most of us who've struggled with alcohol, that's basically something that seems inconceivable or impossible before this treatment. And it's true. Like, I agree, moderate drinking once you have alcohol use disorder is not possible unless you're using naltrexone in the Sinclair method. That's at least my experience. So yeah, I want to thank everyone so much who joined this live. We love to do these with you guys. If you want to learn more about the method and plug in for support through this treatment in a private online program, if you're in the US, I encourage you to go to our website, thrivealcoholrecovery.com. We have lots of free resources over there. We've got success stories and tons of information about the Sinclair method. And if you're in the UK, reach out to Bruce and Matt at rethinkdrink.co.uk. They support people over there who are using this treatment protocol. So thanks again so much, everyone. Those of you who joined us live and those who are watching the replay afterward, I will see you guys on the next live. Thank you, Bruce. Talk to you later.